your product is not your business, but your business is your product. Also, something that I always say is that don't substitute your image of your own product as the market's image of it.
Treading water is the same as drowning to people like you and me. You better start swimming. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob Green. Hey, welcome to today's podcast. We've got Shawn Karami with ePlaybook, and we're gonna have to try to keep this one short because I feel like Shawn and I could talk for days about e-commerce. Welcome to the podcast, Shawn.
Thank you for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
So when I hear ePlaybook, I think about a blueprint, a playbook, and how to operate a game as if I was a football coach. So are you guys like that, where you've got playbooks for the specific sales channels that are e-commerce related? Is that how you guys operate?
Well, we do operate off of a playbook, yeah. And so we actually have all kinds of protocols that we put together for various types of sales channels. That's any place that you would sell goods. Amazon is one of our primary ones, simply because of the market share it has in the U.S.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about ePlaybook then. So you said that you operate off of a playbook or operation standards, but what do you guys really do? How does someone work with an ePlaybook?
The concept we have is, and you and I briefly discussed before we got on, the concept we have is somewhat looking at it as an incubator. And so over time, what happened was, I'm a serial entrepreneur. What happened was people would come to me for various reasons, because some of my companies were more public than others, and they'd almost always be in a crisis, either because something horrible had happened or something great had happened, right? Either way, you can be in a crisis. And so this kept on happening to me over and over and over and over. And so what I looked at as a mentoring relationship, I said, okay, well, there's a way to run a business out of this. And what I thought was, in dealing with, over 1,000 small and medium-sized businesses, there's really three areas of challenges that they have. One is logistics, and a lot of times I throw supply chains in there because with small businesses, they're very intertwined. Then there's an overemphasis on new customer acquisition to the detriment of your cheapest marketing, which is your current customers. And the third is sales channels. 20 years ago, if you wanted to start a business, you just you had to pretty much, whatever you were doing online, have some sort of brick and mortar presence, and especially for selling a product. Today, you can be international from day one. You can sell on a million different places, because what happened over time, all those platforms where they were getting investors, the Facebooks of the world, where they were getting investors just for having eyeballs on their website, had to produce revenues. And those revenues, they noticed, would come only from connecting, or primarily from connecting businesses to consumers. Amazon was doing that from a long time before a lot of other ones were. So what I said was, okay, what we can do, and when I said, okay, we're going to form this into a business, then I'm dealing with people that I don't know ahead of time, or don't know me ahead of time, maybe. And so I said, okay, we will pick one area of these three challenges. I picked sales channels. And then I said it would have to be something that's easy to get into, easy to get out of, which means it doesn't start with equity, because that's always hard to get into and probably even harder to get out of. And then something where it can be independently verified. The work can be independently verified. Something where you can put walls around it and box it up and have it be in one place. And so all of those things, when you put that together and concentrating on sales channels, it made sense to start a relationship with a business on a specific sales channel. Our goal actually is to do that and use it as sort of an incubator, both for the company to evaluate me and my team and what we can bring to the table, and also for us to evaluate what the vision of the founder is, or the leadership team is, where the catalog is, where the room for expansion is. And then from there, developing a more robust relationship, hopefully.
Does your typical partner in this situation have a presence on these sales channels and they're just not doing well? Or is it someone who hasn't even started on, let's use Amazon as an example?
It happens in both. Because our concentration isn't whether you're on a sales channel or not. Our concentration is, okay, have you started a business? What kind of brand is it? What kind of legs does it have to move forward? And then what we do is it's not just that we get on Amazon. Amazon being a primary one, because I mean it's 40% of the e-commerce world, right? So if you're going to sell goods on in the U.S., you're at least going to have to consider. You may rule out, but you're going to have to consider Amazon. So it turns out that our recommendation is, hey, let's try this out on Amazon first, but then we grow from there. So what ends up happening, because of the way we look at it, it's not really important to us whether they're already selling on Amazon or a given platform or not.
Okay. Is it okay? So let's take that, because I think it's two separate probably partners. At least we do a lot on Amazon. I've been doing it for a decade. It's really how I see a lot of people who need help. By the way, Shaun, there's an unlimited amount of potential partners, especially on Amazon. I'd say a majority of sellers I always call it list their products as opposing to launching products, right? They just put it on there as they just want to be in the catalog, I guess. And if you're not at the top of page one, you're non-existent. You're in the back of the catalog and no one ever sees it. So when you're bringing someone to Amazon and you're launching it properly with, a proper playbook, you can have really great success. What I see is a lot of people who are struggling on Amazon today. How do you think about that from like an opportunity perspective, right? So it sounds like you kind of assess the opportunity. Say they're on Amazon now and you're like, hey, listen, you're not doing this. You're not doing imagery correctly. You're not doing listing correctly. You're not doing PPC correctly. We can do all those things. Therefore, we're a good fit for you. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at it as selling anything. I tell this to people
Okay.
all the time. It's more, I'm looking to work with people, and sometimes the way I work makes sense to them, and we work together. And sometimes the way they work makes sense to me, and we work together. Sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes I look at something and say, that's not really, it doesn't fit with the way that my vision of moving something forward is. This is the way I look at it. If you want to do it this way, we can certainly help you. But if you don't, that's fine too. I'm not saying
Sure.
that's the only way to do it. Sorry, I'm not sure if I even got close to answering your question.
No, I think a good way my follow-up would be like, what is an ideal partner for you when you see it? We've got our own paradigm we all view the world through, right? So when you see this, like, what are the characteristics of an ideal customer or ideal partner for you?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'm about to publish my second book, and in there's a number of different things I say. I have little catchphrases that I use for various things, and I start with your product is not your business, but your business is your product. Okay.
Okay.
So someone who understands, or at least is willing to understand that concept, because a lot of times you say to people, what do you do? And they immediately put out the product or service that they're doing, and that's what they do. But the world, as a consumer, if you ask that person, you ask the very same person, where do you go shop? What products do you shop for? What they'll tell you is all these different things. Why do you buy that product? Well, because I like the product. Okay. I like the way the customer service is. I like the way returns work here. I like this company because of the way it does. I like the way they do this stuff on social media. I like all these different things. And that's what makes them make the decision as a consumer. When you turn them around and put them on the other side and say, okay, now run the business, they immediately say, okay, I want to make the best shoe here and blah, 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 and forget everything else. So someone who's willing to understand that concept. Also, something that I always say is that don't substitute your image of your own product as the market's image of it. So someone who is actually willing to understand, the market is going to tell you what they like about your product. And as much as you may believe and a lot of people I deal with, a lot of people get into business for this, and I really have respect for this. They have a passion about something. They see a problem and they're trying to solve it. That's the business person I want. But that same person, okay. So by the way, that's what I'm looking for. I want that story. I was looking at this and this and this, or I was having this problem. My dog this is literally is a dog food brand we just launched. The guy, he loves his dog. He's having these different issues. And solving the problems for the dog that he loves is how he got into getting into a dog food brand. I want that guy, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, I want him to understand that he has to be flexible, that the product is going to change. Facebook didn't start as what we see it today. Google didn't start being what we see it today. So that at the same time, understanding that there's going to be an evolution. As much as you have a passion and you believe in your product and you believe in your cause and you're there for a principle, you have to be flexible to receive what's in the market and also be ready to respond to it. Next thing I do is a lot of times people say, oh, well, I'm making this and the other. Well, yes, a lot of companies started with a single product. I mean, it's even in their name, right? What is it? You're from Minnesota. Isn't My Pillow Minnesota?
Yeah, the My Pillow guy's
Uh,
Minnesota. Yeah.
yeah, started with one, right?
Yeah.
Forget anything about what you feel about the guy's politics, good or bad. I don't care. The point is, he started with one, um, and then now there's hundreds of different products he makes. So we also look for a person, or a company or a leadership team that's looking to take and expand what they have, to scale not only what they have already, but to also scale the number of products that they have. And so those are some of the beginning things that for us start looking like a relationship we'd like to have. At the same time, we look at a lot of these generalized things because of what I told you, is that we look at that relationship as an incubator into a larger thing. So I'm looking at big picture where the company's going to go and whether it makes sense for us to be involved and whether they would like for us to be involved. So there's a lot of these big picture ideas that have to fit. And then we sort of see how some of the little points, if there would be an interference. Usually there isn't. The big picture things at the beginning are what matter to me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I see a lot of people who invent a problem. They solve they solve a problem. They invent a solution to the problem, and then sometimes they'll be very passionate about it. So that's a second layer they add on to it. I feel like, in my experience, that's the third thing that you said, which is the ability to adapt, is where a lot of people kind of break down. I don't know if that's been your experience or not, but because they've put so much time and energy into it, they fell in love with it, right? And they're like, well, I see the market and I see the problem this way. And one of the best things I say this to my team all the time: listen, I don't know the answer. The market knows the answer. So I'm going to go with what the market says, because I can't tell you what color is going to be the best one. I can give you a guess, but we're going to always test the market and let the market tell us what it wants, right? I want to make the best product based on the market. I want to make the best color. Whatever the market says, the market's right. And maybe that's just my finance background. I don't want to try to dictate to the market unless you're Steve Jobs or a couple other people. It's really, really hard to dictate to the market what people are going to want to use. So is that where you see people kind of like it breaks down a little bit? Is that third layer of the opportunity?
That certainly is a primary place, and yes, there's a place where you kind of invent your own market,
Yeah.
and that can be a luxury that a Microsoft has or an Apple has, but as a small business, you generally don't have that. I'll use that same dog food brand, that same founder. Part of the reason I love working with him is exactly this. As we're getting data, he's like, it sounds like the reviews are coming in like this. Why don't we make a change and he's constantly on virtually a daily basis, which I find to be overly micromanaging, and I tell him that. He's saying, well, why don't we make this change? Why don't we? Well, okay, I don't want to make adjustments on a daily thing because that seems to be, one day's data is not gonna drive this, but it's exactly that. The feedback is coming in, and he's sitting there going this and that. Now, by the way, at the same time, he's thinking about the next product, right? Mm-hmm. The next flavor of the snacks he's making. And he's using this data. We're using it to actually then see, what we do with the next one, the changes we would make to that. And so that's the person you're looking for. And you're exactly right. Most people, or many people, I won't say most people, many people don't have that. Once they have a passion for something, they identify a problem and then they solve it for themselves. They think that solves it for all purposes, for all people, for all time. And a lot of times it doesn't. That problem may be slightly different. People's perception of the problem may be slightly different. If
Yeah.
I'm looking at my dog and I'm seeing the same, they're having the same exact problem. My perception of what's working and what's not working may be different, and the result I want may be a little bit different. So I come back and say, "Oh, wait a minute, it didn't do X. Oh, we didn't even think about X when we're trying to solve the problem, right?" And so, that feedback is incredibly important, and you can't dismiss those things that come back from the market. You may say, "Oh, geez, we can't deal with that problem," but you're going to have to address it, because if the market comes back and says, "I want it to also solve X," you're going to have to say why you're not solving X, or why you shouldn't solve X, or why you're going to have to do something about it if you're not solving it. So anyway, yes, you're absolutely right. It's one of the areas that I specifically look at. I want malleability. I want the belief that the market will drive some of these decisions.
I love that. So you're looking for partners who have the passion, they're malleable, they're adaptable, they've solved the problem. And then I think what you bring, and this is, I'm probably biased in this way, is the hardest part, really, which is the sales and distribution, right? If I make the world's greatest product, but I don't get it in front of people, no one's ever buying it, right? And I think, the old days, you'd go retail. Now you've got all these marketplaces. You've got access to Shopify or Volusion, and you can just run ads now and get data and test it out, right? So you've got that. It's a great opportunity, but it's also more challenging, right? Because all of those marketplaces and those channels require expertise. And any of us that
Yeah,
have
I
ever
mean,
been an entrepreneur, it's tough to wear all those hats, right?
yeah, I tell people this. What I find with the challenge with sales channels, you know, everything in life is a gift and a curse. Okay, so you have that situation of, oh yeah, I have all these options. I can do all these things. I can be international day one. Yes, okay, but do you want to? And can you support it? Is it going to work? And a lot of times, what ends up happening is they end up being on the wrong sales channels for their business for that time, and not enough on the right ones. So you have to look at a product and say, okay, does it make sense to be here? Does it make sense to be on 5 different things? Does it make sense to do anything with Facebook? A lot of times, what people say, and I just use Facebook. You can put anything in there. You can put TikTok, Instagram. People would come with some sort of a product. I always tell people I have more family members that own apparel businesses than I have family members. And so the immediate thing is, okay, I'm going to go on Instagram, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then it's just going to work. Well, yeah. And why do you think that? Well, because we have this other family member, and there's 2 of these companies that I work with that were family members that became extremely successful. But I'm like, but yeah, that was Instagram of 2012. That is not the Instagram of today. And so the shifting landscape, actually. So all these companies that are constantly making a more robust commerce platform out of themselves, which is, again, I mentioned, it's a patchwork of things, because they keep adding things, and it's just a patchwork of things. It creates a shifting landscape, both who's working on there, the businesses that are on there, and also what is possible, how the ads are working, how your marketing's working, how your sales are working, where they're coming from, all of that. Not only that, what ends up happening is they're as much as all of these are tech outlets, they are a lot of times very much not tech on the back end. And I'll use Amazon as an example. As a seller getting on Amazon, yeah, it's a tech, all this stuff, the stuff will be at your house, as a buyer, it'll be at your house tomorrow. Done deal. And all this tech is being used. Got it. When you're on the other side of it, it is very much not tech. You're a lot of times dealing with another human being. A lot of the stuff that they have in there doesn't work exactly as it's supposed to. A lot of the algorithms don't spit out the right responses when you're trying to do something as a seller. A lot of times you're filing claims, which is incredibly common. We have people that work only on doing that. And so you're filing claims, you're dealing with another person, and that person that you're dealing with on the other side, and I have plenty of examples of this, You can put two things, and literally two things that are, different colors of the same thing. Okay, and having the same problem with Amazon, for example. Two people will come up with completely inconsistent solutions. Um, so um, what ends up happening is there's all of this work that has to go in. You have to know exactly what works and doesn't work. Marketing is different. There are differences in marketing in all of them, especially as they go on, as they try to differentiate themselves, to drag more businesses to work with them. And so it becomes kind of a full-time job. You have to also know, that it's not just a matter of, like you said, putting up your product page and then it just flows and add, or here's some ad dollars and now just boom, it's going to go. It's not. There's a lot of competition for different products. It's completely different concepts. Right before I got on with you, I was on with for example, a company that sells health related stuff. So supplements, things like that. For example, with that kind of a business, you're going to have a lot more expensive stuff because your competition is going to be looking at the LTV of a customer, looking at multiple sales. And so your ad dollars are going to be a lot more expensive. Your ad spend is going to be a lot more expensive because your competitors are looking at basically a subscription type model. And that's what they're spending on. So, knowing the nuances of your own business, how it functions on a given platform, and then the nuances of that platform in general are kind of tricky.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of things that we experience all of the time, to be honest with you. Number one is the sequencing of channels, I think, which you touched on at the beginning there, which is really, really important. We're doing outreach now to look at opportunities to buy additional brands. And one gentleman I spoke to recently, their unit economics didn't support retail. And they went retail first. And the business failed because they did it Amazon and other marketplaces and direct to consumer afterwards. But it just didn't support the unit economics because they didn't have a presence, didn't support the negotiations with the retailers, which meant that they could do turnover, they could sell well, but they couldn't make the money that they needed to do to reinvest, right? And had he gone maybe a slightly different path, or maybe at the same time, I mean, most of my friends that, really focus on retail also have a very profitable Amazon D2C business that supports a lot of that venture into retail in the beginning, especially from a cash flow perspective, right? And then the other thing that I think the key word that you said there was nuance. A lot of these aggregators that came in the space kind of thought it was like Legos. It's like I put this block with this block and I get this block. Oh, and it works perfectly. And we all know, anybody that's been on any of these channels for any period of time notice that it's different day to day. It's different in every category. And you can't apply the same, and I've got multiple brands in multiple categories. They don't always, the same rules and same playbook doesn't always apply to every single area of the business because each has nuances in it. And I think that's really the other part that so many people struggle with, is that it takes time and experience to learn those nuances, right? You can't just, there isn't a book that will tell you nuances because it's changing quickly. And that's where, the value of
Yeah.
a partner comes in with that, because it's so fast. It's unbelievable.
Well, literally, what can happen is, things change on even on the menus of the
Yeah.
platforms. So if you're the type of person that's putting on, like, kind of thinking about set it and forget it type of a thing, you may be doing some stuff and you'll teach yourself this and the other today. You'll come back in 3 weeks, and try to do something, and your menu will look different. Your different options will be there, and so, all of those things will make running things just on your own, unless you have a specific focus on these platforms, very challenging, I would say. And it's very hard to make it work, if you're not there and you don't actually sit there and put full attention on it.
I mean, I could just tell from just talking the short while we've had this conversation, you're a thoughtful entrepreneur, and you're thinking about things from a holistic perspective, right? You're thinking big picture, but then you're zooming in to the nuance piece of it, right? So what do I'm a big supporter of entrepreneurism. I'm sure you are also. I feel like I want to help so many of these people, right, to get to that next level. And so many people struggle at different aspects of the business. Do you have any recommendations for someone who's solved a problem? Maybe they're getting a little bit of traction. Like what should those people do to get themselves from, and pick a number, it doesn't really matter. They're doing 100,000 a year and they need to get to 7 figures. Or they're at 7 figures and they need to get to 8 figures. How do you think about it? Are there any best recommendations for people as they think through this? Because there's just so many hats to wear from an individual perspective.
Yeah, I mean, one is, don't think you're going to do all of it on your own. I think there's a certain mindset whenever, a lot of people who start their own businesses, they have the confidence of believing they can do any part of it on their own. And look, I tell this to people all the time. I have more guts than brains. In every one of my companies, I've started literally every single department, everything. I remember the first time I became my own IT person. I had just had my first servers placed into my server room. And this guy, this is on a Sunday night, told me, oh, at one point, I was very agitated with him. And he said, well, you can't fire me. You need me. Sunday night, he was fired, and I became my own IT person. From a person like with that attitude, I tell you, without question, you always have to make sure you bring in people with expertise. You have to build teams. And I understand you start a business, it's just you, but there are ways to get help. And get expertise and get people to work with you. And that's the first place you should be looking. And by the way, even though that's my attitude, that's the first place I'm looking too. Every one of those departments I started, like I said, IT, finance, receivables, marketing, sales, operations, all of those things I've done on my own. But at the end of the day, I've had the understanding that, look, even if I'm the best person in the world at this, I can't run the entire company and not have someone with great expertise in this department. And so always brought in people with expertise as the company grew, and took myself and made myself more of a generalist to oversee those things. That's one place. It is incredibly important to plan. Where are you today, and where do you want to be, and how do you get there? Okay, that planning is where I see people a lot of times not paying a lot of attention. They don't look at those things, and so there's no planning to begin with a lot of times. But where there is planning, there's not enough detail on the things that are identified, and there is not a recognition that you just don't know what you don't know. And I'll give you an example of that. We work with a company now. What we did was we took the retail operations, we took the direct to consumer operations, which is what we formed, and made it into a separate company. But when we started, this is a consumer brand. They only sold through a distributor network, much like Nike used to be. If you wanted a Nike shoe, you would have to go to a Foot Locker or some retail outlet and get it. Same way, that was their business model. What we started with them was the direct to consumer relationship, and that's what later on we incorporated into a separate company. Now, when we started working, their thought was, okay, we can do this direct to consumer thing. And I said, no, you can't. You're not set up for it. You know where the biggest place they weren't set up for it, where they were in their minds the best? Logistics. They were phenomenal. They would get these goods, they would produce them, package them, put them on pallets, and push them into trucks, and boom, 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 these things are going out. Their team works like a machine, and it absolutely did. And it absolutely could not support selling to a consumer directly. Why? Specifically because they were excellent at what they were doing. They were excellent at having these things produced, put in cases, put on pallets, and full truckloads being pushed out of their company. You know what that means? That means they have no access to an individual unit, which is what the consumer wants. They had no way logistically of getting those goods to the consumer. Why? Because they're used to trucks coming and picking up their stuff. Consumers not sending a truck over.
Right.
You got to get that over. And so that the recognition that they had this excellent team, but at the same time, were not able to service an entire business specifically with the same products. Okay, same products.
Yeah.
It was something that was completely lost on them. So they were not taking into account what they didn't know they didn't know. And so that discovery process has to take place, and it's a continuous discovery process, because as you go along, you go, oh geez, I didn't think of this one. Oh, what about this? You have to be prepared to receive that information and to then plan with it. So how you deal with your banking relationships, how you deal with logistics, how you deal with different things that you kind of discount at times, that when you get into, you go, holy moly, there's a lot to this. There's a lot to a lot of places that you run a business. So
Yeah,
that's a
I
whole
think
other
you.
place.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, you never know what you don't know, but it all starts with being open to receiving feedback, right? You have to be. So many people are locked in and myopic with that, right? So you have to be open to it. And then I always call it like fresh eyes, right? Somebody who's an expert at something can look at it in 2 seconds and go, "Wait a minute, you guys are not set up." If you're an expert at logistics, you're like, "Hold on a second, how are you going to ship one at a time when they get orders on Shopify?" Like you're not set up for that. You can't do it. There's no pick pack. There's no individual units. I mean, that's the real value of like you said earlier, hiring an expert or partnering with an expert who knows this inside and out. Because those of us that are really great, whatever you're great at, whatever it might be, you can observe it quickly and identify it, right? And then if you're not that expert, you just don't know what to look for, or even what question to ask. That's what I find a lot.
Yep, absolutely. And by the way, a lot of times the excuse for not having the expertise there is, well, I can't afford it.
Yeah.
Everyone has a budget. And there are ways of, if you're looking for it and you actually want to bring that in, there are ways of bringing them in within your budget. That doesn't mean you get the best thing in the world. That doesn't mean you get something that's completely comprehensive, but you need to do it at your own level. And it needs to be something you seek out every day. And I promise you, it'll make a world of difference in actually making your business work.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I made was I was slow to hire in the beginning. I wore all the hats. I did way too much by myself, and I'm good at some of those things and great at others. And I did way too much of the stuff that I'm good at for far too long. And I wish I had hired and built my team much earlier. We'd be much further along had I done that. So, well, thank you so much. This has been great. I could talk all day about e-commerce. How do people find out more about Shawn and ePlaybook?
Well, you can get on ePlaybooks actually with an s.com,
Okay.
ePlaybooks.com. You can also go to Connect with Shawn. I made it a little bit easier. Maybe that's easier. Connect with Shawn, SHAWN, and you'll find me.
Awesome. We'll put links in the show notes. And Shawn, thank you so much. I think what you're doing is excellent. There are so many people out there that get stuck in this part of the process of becoming an entrepreneur. They got a lot
Yeah.
of the other characteristics. They just get stuck of how do I market it and how do I get it in front of people so that once I do that, I can get enough traction and build a real business out of it. So I appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for having the conversation with us.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with friends.